It was 7:05 on a Saturday morning in August. I flipped one breaker in a substation I had built with my own hands in 1988. 124 luxury homes in the subdivision next door went dark in the same second. The temperature outside was already 91 degrees and climbing. The Labor Day weekend pool party was scheduled for 10. The HOA president was waking up in a Lululemon bikini cover-up. Her house had no air conditioning, no working refrigerator, and no idea yet that her husband had been stealing electricity from my ranch for 9 years. She would learn that in the next 45 minutes. Her husband would learn it from a Texas Ranger. The 124 homes would learn it together. The Texas Hill Country has a particular way of teaching people what infrastructure means. I have spent 32 years watching it teach those lessons. This Saturday, it was finally my turn to teach one. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. I should back up. The ranch is called Vickers Springs. It is 480 acres of limestone and live oak in Burnett County, Texas, about an hour and a half northwest of Austin, and 2 miles east of a town called Bertram. My grandfather paid $63 an acre for it in 1947. My father expanded it twice. I bought my father out in 1985 with 30 years of savings and a small loan from the Burnett County Cattlemen's Bank. I have lived on it with my wife Lynette since the summer we married. 41 years come October. I worked for the Lower Colorado River Authority for 32 years before retiring in 2018. I was a senior transmission engineer. I designed substations, transformer arrays, distribution networks, and the occasional ad hoc fix at 3 a.m. when a thunderhead had knocked out service to half of Llano County. I have a master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin, and a habit picked up from my father of reading my electric bills line by line for 38 consecutive Augusts. That habit, more than any of the engineering, is what mattered in this particular story. I built a private substation on Vickers Springs in 1988. The substation feeds my irrigation pumps, my deep wells, my equipment shop, my hay barn, and the main house. It is fed in turn by a 46 kilovolt LCRA transmission tap I helped engineer for myself the year after I married Lynette. The tap is recorded with the county and with LCRA. The substation is mine in fee. I have maintained it personally for 37 years. It is the only piece of working transmission infrastructure in Burnett County that has never failed. I take some quiet pride in that. Lynette tells me occasionally that the substation is the one thing in my life I love more than my Kubota tractor. I do not argue. I do not need to. She is correct, and we both know it, and the substation does not care either way. Our son Brody is 38. He is a deputy sheriff in Llano County, 2 counties west of us. He is married. He has a 5-year-old daughter named Hazel. Lynette and I see her most weekends. She is the only person I let into the substation, ever. And I let her in only because she has my father's habit of asking sensible questions about machinery she does not yet understand. In 2015, a developer from Atlanta named Spencer Roxborough subdivided the 600 acres west of my property line and built 124 homes on it. He called the subdivision Sunset Mesa Estates. The lot sold for an average of $670,000. The buyers came from Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta. Most of them had not lived in Burnett County before they signed. Spencer had a problem in 2015 that I did not learn about until late that summer. Spencer's problem was that the Lower Colorado River Authority had declined to extend transmission service to Sunset Mesa Estates. The cost of running a high-voltage line 9 miles across rough limestone to serve 124 homes did not pencil out for LCRA's planning department. Spencer's request was denied in writing in April of 2015. Spencer did not tell his buyers this. Spencer solved his problem a different way. In May of 2015, Spencer Roxborough hired a private electrical contractor named Garrick Voss to bury an underground line 812 feet from the panel at the rear of his subdivision under the property line fence and into the secondary distribution panel of my private substation. Garrick Voss did the work over 4 nights in late May with no permits, no inspections, no LCRA notification, and a payment of $23,000 in cash. The tap energized on June 2, 2015. For the next 9 years, the residents of Sunset Mesa Estates received their electricity, without their knowledge, from a substation I had built for myself. I noticed the difference in August. I noticed because I read every electric bill. My LCRA usage for the month of July 2015 came in at 841 kilowatt hours. My usage for July 2014 had been 812. My usage for July 2013 had been 798. The trend had been flat for 14 years. The bill that arrived on August 7, 2015, showed my July usage at 3,472 kilowatt hours. I read the bill at the kitchen table while Lynette was watering her tomatoes on the back porch. I read it 3 times. The number did not change. I set the bill down. I poured a fresh cup of coffee. I went out to the substation. I checked every breaker. I checked every transformer reading. I checked the load measurements on the secondary panel. The numbers told me the same thing the bill had told me. Something was drawing approximately 2,700 kilowatt hours of load from my substation that was not me. I walked the fence line. I found the tap about 90 minutes later. It was buried 20 inches under the soil at the southeast corner of my property. The trenching was fresh. The cover dirt was the wrong color. The conduit splice was a hack job. Undersized, ungrounded, dangerous to anyone who tried to work on it in 5 years. I stood at the spot for a while. I took photographs with the camera I always carried in my truck. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table with the photographs and the bill in front of me. Lynette came in from her tomatoes. "Rennie." "Yes." "What is it?" I told her. She sat down across from me. She put her hand on the back of my hand. "What are you going to do?" I looked at her. I had 2 answers. Both answers led to substantially different outcomes. I gave her the answer my father would have given. "Lynette, I am going to wait." She nodded once. She poured herself a cup of coffee. She sat with me for a long time. That was August 2015. I waited for 9 years. People ask me, after the story became public, why I waited. They ask me with the kind of tone that suggests they think I should have called the sheriff in August of 2015, with the bill in my hand and the photographs in my pocket and a chainsaw in my truck. I have an answer for those people. The answer is that the law in Texas, and the law in most states that grew up on rural easements and private utilities, is a slow law. It rewards patience. It punishes anger. A man who calls the sheriff with 1 bill and a few photographs gets the tap removed and gets nothing else. The contractor walks. The developer walks. The HOA, in due course, hires a different contractor and a different developer and builds the same tap in a different place. The slow law, by contrast, allows a man with a kitchen table habit to build a case the size of an unabridged dictionary, while the wrong people keep doing the wrong thing in front of him. The slow law makes possible the moment when a contractor in Atlanta, a contractor in Texas, a developer in a rented house in Lakeway, and an HOA president on her own porch in a Lululemon bikini cover-up all wake up on the same Saturday morning with the same federal warrants on the same kitchen counter. The slow law is patient. The fast law is satisfying for a week. The slow law is satisfying for the rest of your life. I had a master's degree in electrical engineering. I had also been raised by a man who had been raised by a man who had grown up in the cotton fields outside Lampasas during the Depression. I knew the slow law. I did not wait passively. I waited methodically. I documented every monthly bill from 2015 forward. I photographed the tap location every 6 months. Same angle, same time of day, same camera. I took depth readings of the conduit twice a year to confirm it had not been moved. I filed quarterly notes with my attorney Glyn Fontaine, who started a contingency case file in October 2015 and added to it patiently every quarter for 36 quarters. I made 1 trip to the Texas Public Utility Commission in 2017 to verify, in person, that my LCRA tap permit was current, my substation registration was current, and my private utility records were spotless. They were. They have been every year since. Spencer Roxborough sold the last lot in Sunset Mesa Estates in November of 2016. He moved back to Atlanta. He left the subdivision in the hands of a property management company in Austin that did the minimum required to keep the lights on. The lights were on, technically, because my substation was keeping them on. In 2022, a 46-year-old transplant from Houston named Vanessa Roxborough, Spencer's wife, was elected president of the Sunset Mesa Estates Homeowners Association. She and Spencer had moved into the largest house in the subdivision earlier that spring. The Atlanta sales office had been quietly closed. Spencer was now what his LinkedIn called a private real estate consultant. Vanessa was what her HOA Facebook described as your devoted community president and proud Texas Hill Country neighbor. She had been in office about 90 days when she filed her first nuisance complaint against me. It was about my tractor noise. The tractor was a 1996 Kubota that I ran twice a week for hay and once a year for the pasture mowdown. The complaint was rejected by the Burnett County clerk in 3 business days. She filed another about my cattle. That was rejected in 2 days. She filed a third in October 2022 about the industrial appearance of my equipment barn, which she could see from the back deck of her house. The complaints kept coming. I kept waiting. For 3 years, Vanessa Roxborough filed complaints against me at the rate of 1 every 5 to 7 weeks. Most of them were nuisance complaints to Burnett County. A few were to the Texas Department of Transportation. One was to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, alleging agricultural runoff from my cattle pastures into Sunset Mesa's stormwater retention pond. TCEQ sent an investigator named Maureen Dunaway, who walked my pasture for an hour and a half, took 6 soil samples, called Vanessa from my driveway with the results, and read to her, on speakerphone, the section of the Texas Water Code that prohibits frivolous complaints. Maureen Dunaway then sent Vanessa a bill for the cost of her investigation. Vanessa did not file with TCEQ again. She did keep filing everywhere else. In April 2024, she escalated to the Sunset Mesa Estates Facebook page. The first post was a photograph of my equipment barn taken with a long lens from her back deck. The caption was 300 words long. It used the word blight 4 times. It tagged the Burnett County Tourism Office, which had nothing to do with anything. The post received 48 comments. 37 of them were from her supporters. 11 of them were from a 61-year-old retired ranch wife named Adelaide Marchand, who lived in the smallest house in Sunset Mesa, and who pushed back on Vanessa in writing every time Vanessa posted about me. Adelaide and I had not spoken before April of 2024. After her third comment defending me, she walked down the gravel road to my gate one Saturday afternoon and introduced herself. Mr. Vickers. Mrs. Marchand. Della, please. Mrs. Marchand. She smiled. It was the small, dry smile of a woman who had grown up on a working ranch outside Mason, and who had married into Sunset Mesa Estates the way some women marry into churches they do not entirely believe in. Mr. Vickers, I want you to know that not everyone in our subdivision thinks the way Vanessa thinks. There are about 40 of us. We've been quietly mortified for 3 years. I appreciate it, Mrs. Marchand. Lynette and I started having Della over for coffee on Sunday afternoons. We did not talk about HOA matters for the first 3 months. We talked about her late husband, who had been a Texas A&M veterinarian. We talked about Lynette's career as a 4th-grade teacher at Bertram Elementary. By August of 2024, Della had become, in effect, my eyes and ears inside Sunset Mesa Estates. She did not consider herself a spy. She simply liked the coffee, liked the conversation, and answered honestly when she was asked questions. I asked her, one Sunday in October 2024, what she thought of Vanessa. She thought about it for a moment. Mr. Vickers, Vanessa Roxborough has never lived in a place where the wind blew across an open pasture for a quarter mile before reaching her face. She does not know what that feels like. She has decided that everyone who does know what that feels like is in her way. I do not know how a person becomes like that. I know that Vanessa is like that. I know it will not end well for her. I added that conversation to my notebook. In June of 2025, Vanessa filed her 17th complaint against me. This one was different. This one was a private letter, hand-delivered to my mailbox at the end of the gravel road. The letter was on Sunset Mesa Estates HOA letterhead. It was signed by Vanessa as president, It said the HOA had received reports that my electrical infrastructure was encroaching on the western boundary of my property and was therefore subject to HOA review and corrective action. The letter said the HOA reserved the right to remove any encroaching infrastructure at the HOA's discretion. I read the letter twice. I called Glyn Fontaine. Glyn. Rennie. Vanessa Roxborough has put a threat to my power infrastructure in writing on HOA letterhead. There was a pause on the line. Then Glyn said the sentence he had been holding for 10 years. Rennie, I think she is finally going to do it. I think she is finally going to give us what we have been waiting for. I said, I think she is too. I sat at the kitchen table for a long minute after I hung up. Lynette was on the porch with a glass of iced tea. The cicadas were starting in the live oaks. The June sun was already past its hottest point of the day, and the limestone hills to the east had taken on the dusty rose color they take on every evening between June and September. I thought about what was coming. I thought about what Lynette would have to live with for a few weeks while it played out. I thought about Brody driving up on a Friday night from Llano County, and Hazel asking the kinds of questions a 5-year-old asks when grown-ups are working through something serious. I thought about Della Marchand sitting in her smallest house in Sunset Mesa Estates, with a notebook she had been keeping for 3 years, and a quiet patience that had been waiting for someone to finally listen to her about her HOA president. I thought about all of it for about 4 minutes. Then I poured a fresh glass of iced tea and walked out to the porch and sat with my wife. That was June. The wire was cut on a Thursday afternoon in mid-August. I was in the machine shop replacing the spark plugs in a Honda generator I keep on a wheeled cart for emergencies. The shop is a 40 by 60 steel structure with a concrete floor, a workbench, and an overhead service drop wire that runs from my substation to the shop's main panel along a 12-foot pole at the southwest corner. I had built the pole in 1989. I had installed the drop wire in 1989. The drop wire is 2-pole insulated triplex, rated for 30 amps continuous load. At 3:11 p.m., I heard a chainsaw. The shop's overhead door was open. I walked to the door. I looked across the gravel road. 3 men in white t-shirts and yellow vests, with the words Hill Country Vegetation Services printed on the back, were standing under my service drop. One of them had a steel gas chainsaw running. He was looking at the wire. Vanessa Roxborough was standing 15 feet from him in a coral Lululemon top and white shorts, with a cell phone in her right hand and a clipboard in her left. She was pointing at the wire. I walked out of the shop. I walked to the property line. I stopped about 20 feet from the man with the chainsaw. I did not raise my voice. Mrs. Roxborough. She turned. She smiled. Mr. Vickers, we are conducting routine vegetation maintenance along the HOA property line. Your service drop is encroaching on our airspace. Per the letter I sent you in June, the HOA is exercising its corrective action authority. Mrs. Roxborough, the wire is on my property. The pole is on my property. The airspace above my property is mine, not yours, and you have no corrective action authority over any part of it. Mr. Vickers, I'm afraid you are mistaken. The man with the chainsaw looked at me, looked at Vanessa, looked at the wire, and made a decision I have no doubt he came to regret. He revved the saw. He brought it up to the wire. He cut the wire in 3 seconds. The wire fell across my gravel drive in 2 pieces. There was a small bright flash as the live conductor grounded out on the chain-link fence. The shop went silent. The lights, the air compressor, the radio, the welder, all dead in the same second. Vanessa Roxborough smiled wider. There, that should teach you a lesson, Mr. Vickers, about the importance of cooperating with your community. I did not raise my voice. I did not respond. I turned around. I walked back to the shop. I closed the overhead door. I walked to the house. Lynette was in the kitchen. Rennie. Yes. The lights went out. I know. Vanessa Roxborough's contractor cut my service drop. They are still on my property. I have it on 3 cameras. I am calling Glyn. Lynette put down the dish towel she had been holding. Rennie, today. Today. All of it. All of it. She kissed my cheek. She went into the bedroom and started packing an overnight bag because she knew, the way she has known these things for 41 years, that Brody would be coming up from Llano County by sundown. I called Glynn from the kitchen. "Glynn, Vanessa Roxborough's hired crew just cut my service drop to the machine shop. I have it on camera. The crew is still on my property. They have a steel chainsaw, a yellow vest, and a Lululemon-wearing supervisor." "Rennie." "Yes. It is time." "Glynn, it is." He hung up. I called Trey Whitaker at LCRA. I called Reva Hartline at the Texas Public Utility Commission. I called Captain Garth Wincrest at the Texas Rangers. I called Sheriff Otis Tedford at the Burnett County Sheriff's Department. I called my son Brody at the Llano County Sheriff's Department. By 5 p.m., all 5 of them had been briefed. By 6 p.m., all 5 of them were on their way. By 7 p.m., the substation that had been quietly powering 124 homes for 9 years had a court order pending against it, a Texas Ranger sedan parked at the end of my gravel road, and a deadline scheduled for 7:05 a.m. on Saturday morning. Vanessa Roxborough did not know any of it. She had returned to her house at 3:45 p.m. with a self-congratulatory smile and a story to tell at the HOA Facebook page about how she had addressed an encroachment issue with our rural neighbor. She posted the story at 4:18. By 7 p.m., her Facebook post had 241 comments. None of them, yet, contained the word substation. The contingency file Glynn Fontaine had been quietly maintaining for 10 years was 496 pages long. Page 1 was the August 2015 LCRA bill that had first told me something was wrong. Page 2 was the photograph I had taken of the tap location 90 minutes after I had read that bill. Pages 3 through 186 were the quarterly photographic documentation Glynn had taken. Same angle, same depth measurements, same coordinates, over 36 consecutive quarters. Page 187 was the affidavit Trey Whitaker had signed at LCRA in 2019, confirming, on the record, that the tap was unauthorized, unpermitted, and never disclosed by Spencer Roxborough or his construction company. Pages 200 through 350 were Vanessa's nuisance complaints, cross-referenced and indexed. Pages 351 through 420 were the records of Spencer Roxborough's known financial dealings, pulled by Glynn through a series of public records requests over 5 years, that established a pattern of cash payments to Garrick Voss, whose Atlanta business license listed his specialty as private utility installation, and whose Georgia state tax filings showed exactly $23,000 in unexplained income in May of 2015. Pages 421 through 496 were the proposed court documents, drafted, redrafted, polished, that Glynn had been ready to file the moment the right trigger arrived. Vanessa Roxborough had finally pulled the trigger at 3:11 p.m. on Thursday, August 14, 2025. She had hired a vegetation crew to cut my service drop. She had stood on my property and watched it happen. She had filmed it on her cell phone. She had posted about it on the HOA Facebook page. She had, in the space of an hour, generated more admissible evidence than the entire decade of nuisance complaints combined. By Friday morning, Glynn had filed 3 documents at the Burnett County District Court. The first was a motion for emergency declaratory judgment, citing Texas Penal Code Section 31.04, theft of services, and Texas Utilities Code Section 17.005, unauthorized energy delivery. The motion asked the court to declare the Sunset Mesa tap unauthorized and to authorize me, as the rightful owner of the substation, to disconnect the tap. The second was a federal complaint forwarded to the United States Attorney for the Western District of Texas, alleging theft of services under 18 U.S.C. Section 641, conspiracy to defraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 371, and wire fraud across state lines, based on Spencer Roxborough's documented use of the federal mail in concealing the tap's existence. The third was a criminal complaint with the Burnett County Sheriff's Department against Vanessa Roxborough, charging her with criminal damage to property under Texas Penal Code Section 28.03. The court order arrived Friday afternoon at 3:22 p.m. The judge, a 68-year-old retired LCRA legal counsel named Erlene Castleberry, signed it without leaving her chambers. She wrote a single sentence at the bottom in fountain pen ink. "Mr. Vickers, disconnect at your discretion." Glenn handed me the signed order at my kitchen table at 4:41 p.m. on Friday. Lynette poured him a cup of coffee. She did not ask what time the disconnect would happen. She did not need to ask. She had married a man who reads electric bills line by line for 38 Augusts, and who, when he finally decides to act, acts at 7:05 on a Saturday morning, because that is the hour at which all his decisions, for the last 41 years, have been most precisely his own. Glenn drank the coffee. He drove home. He set his alarm for 5 a.m. So did I. The disconnect plan had been engineered in 2019. I had drawn it on a single sheet of LCRA engineering vellum, signed by Trey Whitaker and by me, and stored it in a folder in my office filing cabinet for 6 years. The plan called for a controlled de-energization of the unauthorized tap at the secondary panel of my substation. Total operation time, assuming a qualified 2-person crew with proper PPE and lockout-tagout procedures, was 11 minutes. By 6 a.m. Saturday morning, my equipment barn had been turned into a small operations center. Trey Whitaker had arrived at 5:40 in his LCRA pickup, with a folding clipboard and a black and white printed copy of the engineering vellum. Glenn Fontaine had arrived at 5:55, with the court order in a clear plastic sleeve. Texas Ranger Captain Garth Wincrest had arrived at 6:02 in an unmarked sedan with 2 Rangers in tactical vests behind him. Sheriff Otis Tedford had arrived at 6:07 in a Burnett County pickup with Deputy Cherie Hollings. Reva Hartline had arrived at 6:15 in a state vehicle with a body camera already running. Brody had arrived at 6:20 in his Llano County Sheriff's pickup. He climbed out, hugged his mother, shook my hand, and asked me one question. "Dad, you good?" "I am, son." "Mom good?" "She is." Hazel asks where Grandpa is. "Tell her Grandpa is at work." Brody nodded. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He stood at the edge of the operations center with his hat in his hand. At 6:55, Trey and I walked to the substation. The substation is a small, fenced concrete pad, about 120 feet behind my equipment barn. It contains 3 transformers, a primary breaker, a secondary distribution panel, and the unauthorized tap that Garrick Voss had spliced into my secondary panel at 4:17 a.m. on May 28, 2015. The splice was crude. The splice had been crude for 9 years. It had functioned, but it had functioned dangerously. And any small fault in the splice could have killed someone in Sunset Mesa Estates on any random afternoon for almost a decade. That detail would, in the federal trial later, become an aggravating factor in the sentencing of Spencer Roxborough. Trey walked the lockout-tagout procedure. He confirmed PPE. He confirmed the de-energization sequence. He looked at me. I looked at him. "Trey, are we good?" "Rennie, we are good." I opened the primary breaker. The secondary panel went dark on the unauthorized leg. Trey disconnected the conduit splice in 71 seconds with a torque wrench he had brought from LCRA. The splice fell free. The unauthorized tap was, as of 7:05 a.m. on Saturday, August 23, 2025, physically and electrically severed. 124 homes in Sunset Mesa Estates went dark in the same second. Trey looked at his watch. "Rennie, 11 minutes flat." 11 minutes flat. We walked back to the operations center. It took 2 minutes and 41 seconds. The first phone call to the Burnett County Sheriff's non-emergency line came in at 7:07 and 40 seconds from a Sunset Mesa Estates resident named Holden Brackish, who was making coffee in his bun drip when the power died. The second call came in at 7:08 from a woman named Trudy Wendell. By 7:30, the Burnett County Dispatch had logged 86 calls. The dispatcher on duty was a 34-year-old woman named Madge Tidwell. Madge had been briefed on Friday afternoon by Sheriff Tedford. She had a script. She read it to every caller. "Sir or ma'am, we are aware of a power-related issue affecting your neighborhood. A unit has been dispatched. Please remain at your residence and do not attempt to interact with any utility equipment. Further information will be available later this morning. 86 calls. 86 recitations of the script. Madge did not break her composure once. By 7:45, Vanessa Roxborough had figured out that her power was not the result of a typical outage. Her phone calls to her HOA's electrical contractor, a man named Karsten Boris, who had been on Spencer's payroll for 9 years and who had been arrested by federal agents in Atlanta at 6 a.m. on a separate warrant, were not being returned. Her calls to LCRA's customer service were being routed to a recorded message that said, in a friendly Texas voice, "We're sorry, but the address you provided is not in our service area." She drove out of Sunset Mesa Estates at 7:51 in her Lexus GX 460, with the windows down because the AC was not working. She drove past my gate at 7:58. She did not stop. She continued north into Bertram. She drove to the sheriff's substation. She found the door locked because the Burnett County Sheriff's Substation does not open until 8:30 on Saturdays. She drove to the LCRA Marble Falls office. She found the door locked because the LCRA Marble Falls office is closed on weekends. By 8:15, Vanessa Roxborough was driving back south on Highway 281, with the AC still not working, the temperature outside already 94 degrees, and the slow dawning suspicion that something larger than a typical power outage was happening to her HOA. She pulled into my gravel drive at 8:26. I was on the porch with Lynette and a cup of coffee. Garth Wincrest was standing on the porch with his hat in his hand. Glenn was at the kitchen table, going through the court order one more time. Trey had driven back to LCRA to file the post-disconnect paperwork. Brody was on the phone with his wife. Vanessa parked the Lexus 4 feet from the porch steps. She got out. She did not have her phone. She did not have her clipboard. She was wearing a coral Lululemon top, white linen pants, and a pair of leather sandals that had clearly been chosen for a pool party. She walked up to the porch steps. She did not climb them. "Mr. Vickers, something has happened to our power." "Mrs. Roxborough." "Mr. Vickers, your substation." "My substation is operating normally, Mrs. Roxborough." "Then why is our—" "Mrs. Roxborough, your subdivision has been receiving power illegally from my substation since June 2, 2015. Your husband's construction company installed an unauthorized tap during the development of Sunset Mesa Estates. The tap was disconnected this morning at 7:05 a.m., pursuant to a court order issued Friday by the 33rd District Court of Texas." She stared at me. "Mr. Vickers, that cannot be true." "Mrs. Roxborough, it is." She turned to look at Garth Wincrest. She had not yet recognized the Texas Ranger badge on his belt. "Officer, tell this man he is making a mistake." Garth tipped his hat. "Mrs. Roxborough, I am Captain Garth Wincrest of the Texas Rangers, Major Crimes Division. I am here to inform you that you are under arrest on charges of criminal damage to property and conspiracy to commit theft of services. Your husband has been arrested at your residence in Lakeway pursuant to a federal warrant. Please place your hands on the porch railing." She placed her hands on the porch railing. The Lululemon top moved with the motion. The leather sandals scraped on the porch step. The cuffs went on at 8:29. It was a quiet operation. Garth had done 1,000 of them. He was good at the moment where the cuffs went on without any drama, and he was good at the silence afterward, and he was good at the small administrative business of reading the rest of the Miranda warning to a person who has already heard the worst of it and has nothing further to add. Vanessa, to her credit, did not struggle. She did not argue with Garth. She did not look at me again. She walked down my porch steps and across my gravel drive, in her white linen pants and her coral Lululemon top, and her wrong shoes for the wrong morning. She climbed into the back seat of the unmarked sedan. Garth closed the door. He tipped his hat to Lynette. He drove off. The Lexus GX 460 stayed parked 4 feet from my porch steps for the rest of the day. Brody moved it that evening to the gravel turnaround at the end of the drive, on the theory that we did not need to look at it through the kitchen window for the rest of the weekend. We did not look at it. By Tuesday morning, a tow company from Marble Falls had been called by Vanessa's divorce attorney, and the Lexus was gone. Lynette stood up from the porch swing. She walked into the kitchen. She came back with a fresh cup of coffee. She handed it to Garth Wincrest. He thanked her. He took a sip. He led Vanessa Roxborough to his unmarked sedan. Vanessa did not say anything else. She did not look at me again. By 9 a.m. Saturday, the temperature in Sunset Mesa Estates was 96 degrees and rising. The refrigerators were warming. The AC was off. The pool pumps were silent. The Labor Day weekend pool party that Vanessa had scheduled for 10 a.m. was, by all reasonable standards, canceled. By 11 a.m., the local news had picked up the story. A reporter named Bay Whitsett from KXAN Austin had been tipped off Friday evening by Reva Hartline at the PUC and had been waiting at the LCRA Marble Falls office at 6 a.m. By 11, she had verified the details with 3 independent sources. By 11:45, her story was live on KXAN's website. The headline read, "Sunset Mesa Estates powered illegally for 9 years. Engineer disconnects tap. HOA president arrested." By noon, the story had been picked up by the Austin American-Statesman. By 2 p.m., it was on the Texas Tribune. By 4 p.m., it was the lead story on every Austin and San Antonio TV station. I did not give interviews. Glenn handled all media inquiries with a 1-paragraph written statement. Della Marchand convened the HOA emergency board meeting at the Bertram Community Center at 6 p.m. that Saturday evening. 81 of the 124 households attended. Della was elected interim HOA president by acclamation. She spoke for 11 minutes. She read out, in plain English, the timeline that had been forwarded to her by Glenn Fontaine. She named the parties. She quoted the court order. She read aloud the section of the Texas Utilities Code that had been violated. She did not editorialize. At the end of her presentation, she made a single motion. I move that we immediately suspend the Sunset Mesa Estates HOA from all operations involving the Roxborough Construction Group or any of its affiliated entities, request court-ordered receivership, and refer all matters to the Texas Attorney General. The motion carried by a vote of 78-3. Lynette and I sat on our porch on Saturday evening as the sun went down over the limestone hills. The temperature was still 93 degrees. We could see the dark band of Sunset Mesa Estates on the eastern horizon. No porch lights, no driveway lights, no glow from the pool deck. The subdivision was as dark as the limestone hills had been before 1947, before anyone had bothered to bring electricity to Burnett County at all. Lynette said, "Rennie." "Yes." "It is very quiet." "It is." "It is the way it should sound, isn't it?" "It is." She took my hand. The federal indictment came down 9 days later. Spencer Roxborough pleaded guilty to 7 counts in November. He received 9 years federal and was ordered to pay $4.8 million in restitution to the residents of Sunset Mesa Estates. Garrick Voss, the contractor who had buried the tap, pleaded guilty to 3 counts and received 4 years federal. He lost his Georgia electrical license for life. Karsten Boris received 2 years. Vanessa Roxborough pleaded guilty to 4 counts in November: criminal damage to property, conspiracy to commit theft of services, conspiracy to interfere with federal regulatory authority, false reporting in an official HOA capacity. She received 5 years state prison. She filed for divorce from Spencer in October. The divorce was finalized in March of the following year. The residents of Sunset Mesa Estates spent 11 days without power. By day 4, 68 households were in hotels. By day 7, the LCRA had begun emergency transmission work. By day 11, legitimate service was restored. The cost, $1.2 million, was billed to the Sunset Mesa Estates HOA. Della Marchand served as interim president for 16 months. Sunset Mesa residents elected her to a full term in the spring. Her first action as elected president was to amend the HOA covenants to formally acknowledge that the subdivision's electrical service had been illegitimate from 2015 through 2025, and to formally apologize in writing to Rennie and Lynette Vickers. The amendment passed by a vote of 118-6. Della drove out to my gate the afternoon the amendment passed. She handed me a framed copy. "Rennie." "Della." I hung my copy in the community center, right next to a copy of the Texas Utilities Code, Section 17.005. Vanessa's old plaque came down. I let the wood paneling underneath the plaque show through. I am not going to fill the hole. I am going to leave the hole there for at least 10 years. I laughed once. I do not laugh often. Della, that is a fine decision. LCRA legitimate transmission to Sunset Mesa Estates went live on day 11. The new service line is buried under a properly permitted easement that crosses the southern edge of my property. I granted the easement at fair market value. The easement payment, approximately $56,000 per year, indexed to a Texas utility rate schedule, comes to Lynette and me as quarterly checks. We have donated every check, in full, since the first one arrived, to the Texas Hill Country Rural Electric Cooperative Foundation. The foundation uses the funds to extend electric service to low-income ranches in Burnett, Llano, and San Saba counties. By the end of the second year of donations, the foundation had connected 41 ranches to legitimate, permitted, safely engineered electric service. By the end of the third year, the number was 87. I do not believe in monuments to myself. I do not believe in foundations named after living people. I do not believe in the kind of philanthropy that requires a building or a plaque or a quarterly newsletter with the donor's photograph above the editor's letter. The Texas Hill Country Rural Electric Cooperative Foundation is what it has always been. It was founded in 1958 by a group of Burnett County ranchers who had decided, against the wishes of every commercial utility in the state, that small operations deserved access to electric service. The foundation has been quietly doing that work for 67 years. I am simply, for the foreseeable future, one of its donors. I am one of about 300 others. Most of them have been donors for longer than I have. None of them have plaques. None of them want plaques. That is the right model, in my opinion. That is the right model of how good things get done in the country I have lived in for 67 years. Brody and his wife drove up the second Sunday after the disconnect, with Hazel in the back seat. She climbed out wearing a small straw cowboy hat that Lynette had bought her in May. She walked across the gravel drive to my porch. She climbed onto the porch swing. She looked at me. Grandpa. Yes, ma'am. Daddy says you turned off the power for the bad people. I did, sweetheart. Daddy says they were stealing your wire. They were. Daddy says you let them steal it for 9 years, and they did not know you knew. That's right, sweetheart. Grandpa, why did you let them steal it for 9 years? I thought about that for a minute. Hazel asks the right questions. I told her the truth. Sweetheart, sometimes the right thing to do is to wait until the wrong people have done so much wrong that everyone can see it. I waited because waiting was the right thing to do. I did not enjoy waiting. I did not pretend to enjoy it. I just did it. And then, on the day they did the last wrong thing, I did the right thing. That is how it works. She thought about that. She picked up a stuffed rabbit and held it on her lap. Grandpa, are they going to come back? No, sweetheart. They are not going to come back. Good. We sat on the porch swing for a while. Lynette brought out lemonade. Brody and his wife sat on the porch steps. The sun went down over the limestone hills. The cicadas started up in the live oaks, the way they always start up at sundown in August, which is to say, all at once, in a single, long, sustained note that has been the sound of evening in Burnett County for every August since I was born. Hazel fell asleep in my lap around 8:45. Brody carried her to the guest room. He came back. He sat down beside me. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, the substation." "Yes, son. It is the only one in the county that has never failed." "That is correct, son. Promise me you will teach Hazel how to maintain it." "I will." He nodded. He did not say anything else. If a Karen has ever cut your wire, blocked your driveway, or assumed that her HOA outranked your deed, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like one breaker, flipped at 7:05 on a Saturday morning, in a substation an electrical engineer built with his own hands in 1988, and never expected to need to defend in court.
Here's the thing about Vanessa Roxborough. She didn't lose because Reddy Vickers was meaner than her. She lost because she didn't read her own utility bill. Spencer Roxborough's electricity tap had been on her property since she moved in. Her air conditioning had been pulling current illegally for 9 years. her pool pump, her refrigerator, her string lights. All of it had been stolen from the neighbor she was busy filing nuisance complaints against. She did not know. Spencer did not tell her. Vanessa filed complaints anyway. The strongest neighbors in any community are the ones who read the bills, photograph the splices, document the trends, and wait. Rennie did not win because he was angry. He won because he had been ready since August of 2015. If Karen had ever decided that her HOA had a right to your land, your wire, or your patience, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. Justice is patient, and sometimes it is just one breaker flipped a sunrise.